Hey everybody, sorry for the webcam video thing, I just wanted to add this in before we start the video proper. This is the first video I am putting up on YouTube. If you've been following me on Blip until now, thank you, and you can now subscribe to me at the address floating somewhere around here, I would imagine. Don't worry, I'm still posting videos to Blip, they'll just go up on YouTube a few hours later. For those of you actually watching this on YouTube, hello and welcome. This is something of a side project for me where I do analysis of PC games post-hype, thus the name Late Reviews. I'll start putting up some of my older, less crappy videos in the future, but for now, let's start this off with the new intro! Wait, stop, that's the old intro. I could have sworn I had this around here somewhere. No, that's the old intro. That's just weird. Okay, that's private. Forget this, just go to the title card. So, I've been playing a lot of first-person shooters lately, new and old, and as I was playing through the Half-Life series, I started thinking to myself how different it felt compared to a lot of other shooters that have come out in the last few years. So I started asking myself, how did it get to this point? And all roads seem to lead back to one thing: Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. But this requires a bit of a history lesson first. Let's start with LucasArts, the company founded by George Lucas to develop and control games for franchises he owned, namely the Indiana Jones and Star Wars properties. Most gamers like to remember LucasArts for their adventure titles like the Monkey Island series and Grim Fandango, but the bulk of their work were Star Wars titles. Some were early gems like the X-Wing and TIE Fighter series, Rebel Assault, and I've already given an overview of the Dark Forces Jedi Knight series. Then, after the turn of the millennium, things started taking a turn for the worse. While there were still gems like Knights of the Old Republic, developed out of studio by BioWare, LucasArts games started to suffer from poor quality control and overuse of locations from the franchise, like constantly putting the games in the deserts of Tatooine and Snowy Hoth. Around this time there was also the rise of the realistic and tactical shooters like Counter-Strike and Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six, eventually giving birth to the war shooter with titles like Medal of Honor. Now, instead of blowing up aliens and demons with rocket launchers, first-person shooters shifted to storming the beaches of Normandy with historically accurate rifles. Never mind the anomaly of the Wolfenstein games, which had you killing Nazis before it was cool. By the time Activision entered the fray with the Call of Duty series, gamers were getting tired of shooters that kept competing to see who could most accurately rip off the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan. Penny Arcade summed it up accurately at the time with Omaha Beach is the new Hoth. You could tell publishers were getting desperate when they flirted with games set during the Vietnam War, but thankfully the market started to dry up before someone tried Full Metal Jacket the game. So with the gaming public getting bored of historical shooters, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was a much-needed departure from the old trends. Even if it started the new, terrible trends we're stuck in today. Okay, I should probably get this out of the way before we get too far in, just to save myself some angry comments. I don't think Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare is a bad game. It has some very memorable moments, and I had fun replaying it for this review. That being said, it has some serious problems that cannot and should not be ignored by its fans and supporters. Let me put it to you this way. Modern Warfare was to video gaming what Neon Genesis Evangelion was to anime. I'll give you a minute to think about that, but for now, let's get into the actual game. Our story begins with Russia in the midst of a civil war, and a Middle Eastern leader trying to get a nuclear weapon. Basically a neocon warhawk's wet dream. The player follows the career of Soap McTavish, mute player character and new recruit into the British SAS as they attempt to defuse the situation, mostly with brutal interrogations and stealthy murder. Except we also briefly jump into the head of US Marine Paul Jackson. They must have thought Jack Paulson wouldn't sound American enough, as they hunt down a warlord in nameless Middle Eastern country number 17. The big shocker moment of the game has already been well spoiled, so it should be no surprise how that mission ends. After that, it's a race to find the masterminds before they can capture another nuclear weapon and threaten to turn the game over to the Fallout franchise. Most of the campaign jumps around from mission to mission, keeping things interesting if a bit unfocused. Rescuing a damaged tank, codenamed Warpig without the slightest hint of irony, escaping enemy territory after a helicopter crash, raining down death from a flying gunship, and even a flashback to a failed assassination attempt in the radioactive rubble of Pripyat. Unfortunately, that same variety makes it hard for the game to nail down a proper tone for too long, and the quality can shift dramatically between loading screens. Some missions seem like they were made by totally different development teams. A tightly scripted mission that could have easily been a level from a rail shooter gives way to a frantic firefight in the streets level, where you get murdered if you don't stop and kill every single thing in your way, and yelled at if you take too long to advance. The Middle Eastern missions in particular are a royal pain, as you have to fight wave after wave of enemies unsure when it's safe to actually move, as more enemies keep coming around the same corners, appearing in the same windows and rooftops, like infinitely respawning target dummies that someone decided to arm in the interest of fairness. The artificial intelligence is also somewhat suspect. Enemies are competent enough at hitting you, but your AI squad mates have blind spots the size of trucks, often running right past plainly visible enemies or blindly dashing into open fire. It's good that they're not killing everything before the player can, but it would be nice if you could count on them to watch your back when they tell you to take point. It'd also be nice if the assholes stopped taking all the good cover positions. Apart from the AI and the weak lip-syncing animations, the game is overall quite solid, even after 7 years. The graphics are still pretty nice, the mechanics are tight, and everything has a nice polish and professionalism to it. Exactly what you'd expect from one of the first real AAA games. Even the tutorial level is quick and sensible.
Knife the watermelon. Nice! Your fruit killing skills are remarkable.
I think we just found the origin of Fruit Ninja. Anyway, I like the obstacle course system of familiarizing you with the gameplay and how your score determines your difficulty setting. But it seems a bit off that your difficulty level is judged more by memorization through repetition than actual skill. There's also a clever system where your squad mates will spot enemies for you and shout out what and where they are. Now I know these are statements that are structurally composed of different audio clips such as RPG and over by that green car and to the east to form a complete sentence. And from an audio editing standpoint, the assembly is almost seamless. Unfortunately, the system is a bit of a waste when the directions are vague, such as over by those cinder blocks when the entire area is made of cinder blocks, or when the directions are just plain wrong. One of the real issues I have with Modern Warfare is the bizarre fetishism for military hardware. I know it's called Modern Warfare for a reason, to highlight the weaponry and equipment used by the military of today. Or at least 8 years ago. But a lot of it just gets thrown at you suddenly with no prompting on how to use it, such as the long-distance sniping mission, or the gunship section, and then we never do it again. Now normally in most games, mechanics like this are introduced, explained, and then they come up again later, usually when the situation is more dire. Modern Warfare, on the other hand, is like going bowling. But on the 3rd and 7th frames, you have to go to the arcade and win something from the claw machine before you're allowed to bowl again. And in sticking to that realism issue, Modern Warfare was also one of the first games I can remember doing away with the old tried and true shooter mechanic of health meters, where your remaining life is determined by a number and taking hits required you to find medical supplies to patch yourself up before the next fight. Since that wasn't realistic enough, your character can now take an infinite number of hits, just as long as you take a little break now and then. When you're hit, your vision gets red and blurry, but hiding behind cover, not getting hit, will just regenerate your health. On one hand, it keeps the action going by removing the need to scrounge for armor and medkits between fights, but it removes a lot of the tension and strategic risk versus reward thinking old shooters encouraged. There are some other problems with this game trying to call itself realistic, like how you can change magazines without losing ammo and you always have a fresh clip when you reload. As far as the plot goes, it's actually better than I remember, and it's definitely better than the sequels that built on it. You spend the majority of the game trying to stop genuinely bad people from doing bad things, ultimately culminating in a tense and exciting race to stop a nuclear missile launch before it wipes out the American East Coast. The sections where you play as a Marine charging into a fight you only half understand come off as a bit of commentary on recent American military action, and the nuclear blast ending to that chapter is preceded by something fairly noble. You have a chance to escape the blast zone, but you go back to rescue a downed helicopter pilot. If you look for them, there are genuine moments of self-awareness in the game, like the chapter titled No Fighting in the War Room, a nice nod to the classic Cold War film Dr. Strangelove. The actual ending is a bit of a kick in the nuts. The day is won, the nuke's disabled, and our heroes still have to get away from the bad guys. Even though we've had our climax, the game's idea of falling action is to have a hyperactive chase sequence where you're supposed to lose, and most of the characters we've grown to like and or tolerate get killed. Fair enough if that's how they wanted to end it. But what annoys me is that the player is given agency throughout this scene, as if they could have avoided this fate somehow. And that, in a nutshell, was Modern Warfare. How was it? Short. Seriously, this may be the worst thing I can say about Modern Warfare. For all its good points and bad points, it's barely 4 hours in length. This might sound silly to complain about, but remember that this was very uncommon before Modern Warfare. To be fair, the Call of Duty games always hedged their bets with a heavy focus on multiplayer. But here I am trying to play it 8 years later, only to find their mandatory anti-cheat software won't install, so it won't let me play. Now on the whole, I can't call Modern Warfare a bad game. It does a lot of things right, and it's very entertaining with memorable moments. What I really hate it for is how the industry reacted to it. It would be an understatement to say Modern Warfare was popular. It was a big draw for Xbox at the time, it sold millions of copies, and the multiplayer element kept the hardcore fans appeased until the sequel came out. You can't blame other developers for being jealous when they see a game do well like this, but suddenly every other game publisher wanted to steal a piece of the Modern Warfare pie. Just like how physics and physics manipulating tools started showing up in games after Half-Life 2, suddenly more games were getting filled with brown hues, realistic weapons, and iron sights. I'm not saying that was all Modern Warfare's fault, but you can definitely see the trend starting after Modern Warfare's success. Remember how the Dead Space series started off as a somewhat atmospheric horror game with action elements a la Resident Evil 4, but with each sequel it dipped more and more towards the action side? That's a good example of the shift in game development following Modern Warfare. Developers wanted their games to sell like Modern Warfare, so they made them like Modern Warfare to appeal to those fans. Trouble is, those fans still had Modern Warfare to play, and they just alienated their original fan base. I like to compare Modern Warfare to Neon Genesis Evangelion for several reasons. For many people, it was their first introduction to the medium, either from hearing about the hype or recommendations from their friends. Both were landmark titles, and others have tried to copy their style and/or success, and both started out with a solid premise but descended into sheer lunacy and budget issues. How crazy does it get? Well, tune in next time as I tackle Modern Warfare 2, Modern Harder. See you later.
Andre has a red flag, Cheyenne Shings is blue. They all have hills to fly them on, except for Lin Taiyu. Dressing up in costumes, playing silly games, hiding out in treetops, shouting out rude names. Whistling tunes, we hide in the dunes by the seaside. Whistling tunes, we're kissing baboons in the jungle. It's a knockout.
I'm a knife, knifing around. Cut, 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 cut.